But anyway, this is what we're going to read is Edward Zeyad and Philosophy from the Cambridge Journal of Postcolonial Literary Inquiry. You are the paper's final boss. Ivan, in the grand scheme of philosophy, you are not the paper's final boss. The history of philosophy is the grand scheme of, is the paper's final boss. It's like, none of us are the paper's final boss. It's like, sorry. But like, we are not that important. None of us are. Sorry to say. Let's see, drop this. Wait, am I on the dropped? Okay. Oh, I did the dumb thing. I thought my music wasn't playing earlier. But that was silly. All right, here we go. And as always, feel free to make comments along the way. I've never read this before. I don't know what's going to happen. I've never read anything from this journal before. So let's find out. One of the most salient elements of Brennan's intellectual biography of Edward Zeyad is his emphasis on Zeyad's engagement with philosophy. Zeyad's encounters with philosophy and his interventions as a philosopher are emphasized throughout the book. Brennan's careful research allows us to track Zeyad's encounters with philosophy in his formative years, from the influence of the philosopher of art Arthur Zasmary during his undergrad years at Princeton through his lifelong struggle and relationship with the Lebanese philosopher and diplomat Charles Malik, who studied with both Alfred North Whitehead and Martin Heidegger. That is a weird group of people to study with both of. Really. That's a strange thing. Lebanese, who is this Charles Malik that studied with both of those people who we were just talking about in chat? Alright, yeah, who does this? Like, who does this? Both Whitehead and Heidegger. Weird, but okay. Brennan's meticulous research also uncovered Zeyad's interest in history and philosophy of science, an interest that is not apparent in Zeyad's published work. Brennan also emphasizes the influence of Zeyad's encounter with Giambattista Vico's New Science on Brennan's interpretation. Is this a book review? I don't think so. No, this is just talking about the book in some sense. Oh, it's a book forum. I didn't realize. Okay, so we're reading a book forum. Ah, shoot. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, it's a book forum. I was like, what is going on? All right, so maybe there won't be an argument here, but we're just going to talk about some ideas. That's okay, too. It happens. On Brennan's interpretation of Zeyad's encounter with Vico, among the elements that he found especially attractive in Vico is the idea that no one people, race, or religion has priority in the story of human civilization. I mean, that's fair. I mean, we're all human here. At least, close enough. This is a motif that dominates Zeyad's thought and, in part, motivates Zeyad's critical project in his most famous book, Orientalism. However, the central motif would also seem to be in tension with another element in Brennan's account, namely Zeyad's effort to locate an original, completely indigenous third world theory. Yeah, how would you do that? That seems hard. This emphasis on complete indigeneity seems quite uncharacteristic of the general tenets of Zeyad's thought, which tends to emphasize the impossibility of arriving at the requisite level of cultural purity that the pursuit of complete indigeneity presupposes. Yeah, using geography or economic status as a measure of quality of philosophy or just being unique even, there is no reason to think that just because someone's poor or hasn't engaged with other parts of the world or like, you know, whatever it is, that they have anything actually interesting to say. That, again, is like, well, maybe that's the whole point of Orientalism, is thinking that the other is special. I have not read Zeyad, so I don't know. But Orientalism is generally thinking of the, like, anything foreign must be good, or like must be interesting and good just because it's different, which is not true. It might be good, but like, you know, other people have crappy stuff also in their societies, and if you get the crappy part, then it's just crappy. It's like, okay. But like, yeah, the idea that you're going to be able to separate out everything that's bad and then get the interesting part, and that is what's going to be just like the completely indigenous thing, either that's begging the question and saying that you are like assuming that all the good stuff is the unique stuff, but there's no reason to think just because it's unique is good, or it's just wrong. Like, it doesn't make sense. Okay, although Brennan's emphasis on Zeyad's philosophical orientation is salutary, there are some problematic elements when it comes to Brennan's exposition of what he takes to be Zeyad's philosophical positions. Brennan has a tendency to overstate the philosophical originality of the literary theory milieu of the 1970s, from whose standpoint Zeyad theorized into paper over some of the weaknesses that are evident in Zeyad's philosophical interventions. This is especially evident in his account of the critical reception of Zeyad's Orientalism. Brennan accuses Zeyad's critics of failing to engage with his philosophical positions, which formed the point of departure for his analysis of Orientalism. In Orientalism. When it comes to the philosophical positions which inform Zeyad's approach, however, Brennan overstates the philosophical originality of these positions and makes it seem they would have been baffling and unfamiliar to those located outside the disciplinary nexus of literary theory during the 70s. Okay, so they're saying basically Zeyad really wasn't doing anything that unusual. It was just maybe unusual for where he was saying it, but like the literary theory people, they knew this stuff. For example, Brennan writes that Zeyad's point was simply that the reality out there is inaccessible without shared conceptions communicated by words. All reality for us, insofar as we are human and not gods, is necessarily mediated by language, even though that reality may be physically independent of our thoughts. Brennan essentially portrays Zeyad as rejecting naive or direct realism in favor of representationalism. These positions are usually spelled out in the context of debates about the nature of perception, although Brennan's framing is in terms of the relationship between thoughts and reality. Zeyad seems to hold that we only ever have direct access to subjective mental states that represent a mind-independent reality, but we never have any direct, unmediated cognitive access to a mind-independent reality. Okay, I mean, like, that's not crazy. But, I mean, is that what he said? I don't know, but it's not crazy. Like, we only get direct access to our own feelings, and the rest of the world is, like, you know, whatever our senses give to us, but we just don't know if that's perfect. Of course it's not. Brennan writes that this view would have been common sense to anyone schooled in literary theory in the 70s, yet Brennan fails to notice that this view is essentially the view that was held by many early modern European philosophers such as Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, that is, those who followed what Thomas Reid, who certainly did not take the aforementioned view to be in accord with common sense, described as the way of ideas or the ideal system in his An Inquiry into the Human Mind on the Principles of Common Sense. You found something. All right, let's take a look real quick what you found. Truth, the rule or the aim of assertion. And you picked... Did I read this? I've seen this picture before. I've read something by Neri Marsili. When this come out? 2021. I might have read this. But we can look at it. We can look at it later. Okay. But I'm going to go back. Yeah. The problem is I recognize that thumbnail of the philosopher. And so I may have read that already or I've read something by that person. Oh, yeah. Okay, but we can maybe look at that later. I mean, we're already halfway through this. We're almost halfway through. How can I check? You'd have to go to my YouTube and search for it. But can't do it this second. Maybe in a minute. After we get done with this one, I'll take a look and I'll see how my voice is feeling. Okay. That Zeyad himself was adopting a position that was common among early modern philosophers is not in any way problematic in itself, although it does raise some interesting questions about his pursuit of a completely indigenous theory. Yeah, you can't go back to early modern philosophers and be like, I'm going to do an indigenous philosophy based on the colonialists. Moreover, Zeyad's version of the way of ideas is, of course, much more attuned to the influence of social relations and specific histories that condition the formation of these ideas, which mediate our access to reality more than the version of it that was adhered to by many early modern philosophers. Yet it is important to point out that, insofar as Zeyad, as Brennan claims, was taking over this position from the ferment of literary theory in the 70s, he was taking on a philosophical position with a long history, including a history of criticism by proponents of common sense such as Thomas Reid, going back to at least the early modern period. Moreover, at a fundamental level, Brennan never really provides us with a reconstruction of Said's argument in favor of representationalism and against naive or direct realism, for example, appeals to illusionary experiences. Zeyad, as his colleague and friend at Columbia, the philosopher Akil Bilgrami, notes, was averse to formulating arguments explicitly. One wishes that Brennan would have strengthened his case for Said's philosophical acumen by focusing on explicitly reconstructing his arguments and laying them out as clearly as possible. This is a little bit is this really fair? Just because this author wants, explicit arguments, that's not always what is the most interesting thing. Like, we have some Heideggerians, we have Luminance Bloom in chat, and oh yeah, by anyone who doesn't know, let's give Luminance a shout out. Another shout out now that people are here. Shout out Loom. There we go. Luminance is a philosopher. I think it said he was a grad student. I don't know. I saw that on his site. He was he said broadcasting in Eastern Standard Time. So, people, go check out Luminance, continental philosopher, but with analytic history behind him. So, not dumb. Know some things for all you sciencey folks there. Yeah, PhD student. Yeah, and said Eastern Standard. So, maybe somewhere on the East Coast or Brazil or something. I don't know. Upstate New York. There we go. So, yeah, I work in the Bronx. I'm from downstate. Yeah, so we got new philosophy friend. I think it was Tindarius is doing. Thank you, Tindarius. And thanks earlier for the rating in Luminance. But yeah, so now there's some people here. Go check them out. Yeah, they were doing they were going through some Heidegger, and then the other day they were playing Bloodborne with a, some sort of, what was it? Romantic philosophy analysis. Blame Tindarius. Okay, this is what I was saying is, I do a ton of argument analysis. That's not always the, I've torn down a lot of papers, in my time here. Is that really the best thing to be doing with these papers? No, it's not. I mean, you get to find out what's good and bad about them, but sometimes there are other goals. You got to make some hay sometimes. And so the fact that this author wants reconstructions of the arguments, maybe that's a good thing. It probably is, but it may also not be the most important thing. I don't know. But you'd have to ask the Brennan, the author of the book, what they were thinking, why they didn't do it. So, yeah. Okay. So it's just yes, arguments are great, and that's what I do here during a lot of this, but it's not always the most important thing when you're discussing philosophy. What was the point, not what was the argument. Okay, with respect to Said's view on truth, Brennan's account of Said is interesting because it emphasizes that while Said played a crucial role in introducing many of the key thinkers who were subsumed, rightly or wrongly, under the nebulous category of postmodern philosophy to American academia, such as Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, and Michel Foucault, he seems in the end to have held on to a rather old-fashioned correspondence theory of truth, namely the view that a proposition is true if and only if it corresponds to the relevant elements of reality, which, as we have seen previously, is mind-independent in a significant way for Said. Yeah, so here's what the words, and they map onto reality is what happens. And it's if they map on correctly, everything lines up, then it's true. But if they don't, something's there and it maps on and you're missing fingers, they don't match up, then that's false. Your proposition did not match up with the way the world was. So that's, yeah. Correspondence theory. This is continuing. This is evidenced by Brennan's account of Said's views on interpretation. Brennan notes that while Said initially held the view that there is no such thing as a correct interpretation, he moved away from this view. One way to spell this out is to say that for Said, the truth or falsehood of a proposition in the domain of literary interpretation is a function of facts about the text. That is, truth is defined in terms of correspondence with relevant facts. Brennan points out that as Said became more and more involved with the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, in the 70s, the importance of appeals to facts as truth makers became more and more salient to him. It is not difficult to see how someone like Said, who devoted himself to pointing out contradictions between Zionist narratives and facts, would have held some version of a correspondence theory of truth. So it's interesting. They're doing some philosophy of language here to support a political position. What's up, Reading Rab? How you doing? Welcome in. this is sort of a book review, but like, we get to discuss a few of the ideas as we go by. So it's a little less critical, but what is getting said here. And so this is an interesting appeal to a correspondence theory of truth when criticizing other people's narratives. If you can say other people's narratives don't correspond to the world, then it makes their narrative look stupid. And this is a political strategy. So yeah. So, but it's interesting applications of philosophy of language and metaphysics of truth to social problems. Okay, there does, however, appear to be some tension in Zeyad's position here. For if we cannot access the facts directly, which according to this representationalism we cannot, then how can we assess the truth of propositions vis-a-vis, I always forget how to say this, vis-a-vis the relevant facts. Yeah, so again, if you're doing one of these, well, we don't have direct access to the world, we just get some sort of interpretation, then how can you actually say that what our narrative does not match up to the world because we have fallible understanding of the universe? So this by itself does not raise doubts about whether correspondence with mind-independent facts is the truth maker for propositions, but it does raise doubts about our capacity to know whether the propositions that we take to be true are actually true. This problem is, of course, not unique to Edward Said's philosophical orientation. It is yet another iteration of the manner in which, as Reid pointed out, skepticism is inlaid in the way of ideas. I just checked it. You read it. Immoral Lies and Partial Beliefs by Neri Marcel twice in episode 106 and 256. Yeah. But you haven't read that one. Okay. I read it twice. That's hilarious. I knew I had done it. I just could not remember, like, I knew I've read papers over. I could not remember when. That's fucking funny. Did you actually, I could go look at the videos, because sometimes I've just mislabeled videos too. Like, that's also possible. There's a missing one because YouTube, I think I mislabeled it, and I thought it was the same one, and I deleted it. So there's actually a few gaps where I've deleted videos due to mislabeling as well. It's like, oops. So yeah, there isn't a complete number of videos up. Okay, so maybe we can hold on to that. Even if we don't do it today, we can do it soon, or whenever next time you're here. According to Brennan's account, Zeyad does not deny that there is a mind-independent reality, but he is interested in how representations of reality also exert a causal influence on reality. As Brennan puts it, those who followed his writings before Orientalism were unlikely to miss that the book was a meditation on the degree to which representation is part of reality, not just its rendering in words. Okay. Yeah, so if you are going to, discuss the world, that is also part of the world. And that, can affect how you talk about things, is how you represent the world. So, we get into like hermeneutic loops. I know I may have just scared all the analytic philosophers in chat with the word hermeneutic from the continental side, but there is a good point here. You are affecting the thing you are trying to measure by, describing it. So you've got this sort of, what's the damn thing? Heisenberg uncertainty style thing, even though that's completely unfair to Heisenberg. But you are, there's an observer effect. Basically, when you are representing the world, you are also changing the world by putting the representation into it. So, yeah. There is an obvious sense in which our representations exert a causal influence on reality, especially when those representations guide or justify the actions of conquering imperial armies. Lumen says, giving me lots of opportunities to use this emote today. Yeah. Well, there we go. Uncertainty principle, it was not the right thing. I was going for observer effect. So a lot of times they're related in the physics literature, but they're not the same thing. The observer effect is when the observer in physics, by measuring the system, changes the system. But there's the same thing. If you are going to describe a system in literary stuff, you are also changing the world by putting that description into the world. So, similar sort of thought. There is a causal pathway between Orientalist representations and the British bombardment of Alexandria in July 1882. This is an admittedly rather pedestrian but still important way in which representations are part of reality. But perhaps more interestingly, Zeyad was making a stronger claim, namely that our practices of representation can lead to the creation of new categories of people. In this way, yeah, so what I said is not that interesting. Like, people know this. But, like, if you're going to talk about new categories of people, that is more interesting. Like, by, categorizing people differently, you create a new community. In this way, Zeyad may be said to have anticipated what Ian Hacking described as the effect of categorization and representation in making up people. Yeah, so this is more... Yeah, Ian Hacking, did this. I didn't know it was Ian Hacking. But, like, this is sort of the thing where you sort of put people in a certain area, you give them a name, and then by classifying them in a certain way, they react as a group that hadn't been there before. And you can see this, even if you get like people together in like some small little thing. What are those? The like prison experiments where people like take on the roles of the name of the group, like what was it? Where people are told are guards and others are prisoners, and then they take on those roles by giving them the names. And it can happen in political groups too. If you like sort of identify a certain group of people as, one group, then all of a sudden they may start actually acting like the group and take on some identity from that. So you can make up people by categorizing them in a certain way. So up a people, not like individuals, but like a group identity. More specifically, Zeyad was interested in why non-veridical representations persist, and he was interested in ignorance as a structurally buttressed epistemic practice. This is a, come on. Structurally buttressed epistemic practice. Interesting turn of phrase there. In this respect, we can say that Zeyad anticipated some of the questions surrounding the epistemology of ignorance. With respect to this point, there is common ground between Zeyad's project and classical Marxist theory of ideology. On one plausible interpretation of the Marxist theory of ideology advanced by Richard W. Miller, the key phenomenon that the theory of ideology is supposed to explain is the following, quote, "Why have so many socially important ideas distorted reality when available data, reasonable inference, and the state of science dictated no corresponding mistake?" End quote. This is essentially the same question that Zeyad poses in Orientalism as well as the question of Palestine and covering Islam. The question that Zeyad provides is that the same answer that is provided by the classical Marxist theory of ideology, namely that this phenomenon is to be explained by appealing to social forces that systematically interfere with the correspondence between our beliefs, understood as propositional attitudes, and reality. Of course, in the classical version of the Marxist theory of ideology, the social forces in question are spelled out in terms of the notion of class interests within a society, whereas Zeyad was primarily interested in the social forces associated with imperial interests as expressed in relation between the colonized and the colonizer. Okay, so now we've gone from class to colonizers. Okay. This similarity is not surprising given Brennan's emphasis on Zeyad's engagement with the work of some of the most influential Marxist philosophers and sociologists of knowledge in the 20th century, namely Lucien Goldman, Georgy Lukács, and Antonio Gramsci. Don't know how to say those names, I feel bad. That's okay. Brennan provides convincing evidence to support his claim that Zeyad, contrary to popular misconceptions, engaged seriously with Marxism. We need like Anne or Prof. Lar or Shane here for this stuff, though. I am less good at politics and sociology. I know very little. Okay. It is obvious that, in Zeyad's view, the Zionist narrative can be characterized as ideological in the pejorative Marxist sense, and that its acceptance in the United States is to be explained by appealing to its functional coherence with the demands of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. Emphasizing the Marxist moment in Zeyad's thought might also explain why the philosophical element of Zeyad's thought have not been more widely recognized. One potential explanation is that once one takes seriously Marx and Engels' German ideology, as Zeyad claims to have done, it becomes impossible to engage in philosophy, and specifically in epistemology, without at the same time engaging in a project that also has the shape of a descriptive sociology of knowledge. You know, this is fair. You are always going to be situated in a time and place. And the knowledge that you have is going to be... Knowledge is not easy. Like, people think, oh, you can just write stuff down and, like, look stuff up. I don't think that's true. I think that's, like, information. And I don't, like, raise it to the height of knowledge. So, like, the fact that, like, you consider something, like, really good knowledge is going to be a sociological phenomenon for your time and place. And that's going to be an issue. So, yeah. You have to at least pay attention to that, unless you're talking about like hardcore analytic things, like, you know, this is a hand or something. Yeah, like that's always true. But if you get beyond any, like, your really, for lack of a better term, Gettier style knowledge things that will not Gettier. Sorry, I was thinking of Gettier problem. Morean facts. Then yeah, like, I'm sitting down. I know this. Like, no one's going to convince me otherwise that I'm not sitting down. No one's convincing me otherwise that this is a hand. But, like, that's not going to be very helpful in the wider world. Okay. But, like, other than that, yeah, then you're going to need some sort of sociology of knowledge. Philosophers are, for the most part, prone to regard this approach with much skepticism and even with outright dismissal. After all, Zeyad was asking how we can explain the process of canon formation in the humanities in general, including in philosophy, in a manner that takes seriously social factors as important causal elements. Yeah, I mean, philosophers are not going to like this because they want to say, we know what knowledge is, and it's like this formula. It's reliabilism or some other thing. Get away from me, Nat. And so they won't like that, oh, we have to go talk to, like, historians like Shane, sociologists like Shane. It's like, they won't like that. But of course, if anyone doesn't know Shane, let's go give Shane a shout out. Shane. Innes. Yeah, that's Shane. Welcome back, Shane. Shane had computer problems. He's back streaming again. Hooray. He's our resident authority on all things history and sociology. Yeah, it's like, you go find out. Like, Shane knows what the hell he's talking about most times. And he's also, I'd say, a decent epistemologist. And it's interesting. It's because I think, given his understanding of sociology and history, he has a very good feel for epistemology. Even though he's not had any formal training in epistemology, I think he has a very good sense of it. And so it's interesting, just by being a historian and a sociologist, he got the he's got the feel for epistemology. He has a nose for it, like, whatever that would mean. But yeah. So, we're happy he's back. Okay. Like, this is the idea here, actually, is like, I like this idea that why is history and sociology so important is because what we, like, this ideology from Marxism, it's got a point. There's something messing up our interaction with reality. And I don't like this phrasing. Like, I don't know if we ever had any direct interaction with reality, and the idea that there's something messing us up. I don't buy that. But the idea that we are viewing it through a social political lens is definitely true. Like, we are. Wherever you're from, you have a history, you have a sociology, there's going to be political biases somewhere. It's like, it's going to matter. Okay. Zeyad's emphasis on the socially situated nature of epistemic subjects has also led to confusion among some of his critics. As Brennan notes, his emphasis on the socially situated nature of knowledge or ignorant subject and the role of this social position in explaining knowledge or ignorance has been taken by some of his critics to imply that Zeyad somehow denied the importance of truth. Presumably by this, they mean to say that he denied something like a correspondence theory of truth. That's a jump. The idea that they don't think he denied the importance of truth, saying he didn't have the correspondence theory, is a little bit shaky. But okay. I mean, you can have any theory of truth and then say people, you know, you like it's socially situated. Like, okay, but that would matter for any theory of truth. And then so denying the correspondence theory seems like, well, no, that could apply to any theory that knowledge is socially situated. Like, if you have a correspondence theory, then you have to mitigate it, but other theories would have to mitigate or incorporate the idea of being socially situated. Anyway. As I've tried to show, as the author has tried to show, however, there is an obvious sense in which Zeyad subscribes to a pretty much run-of-the-mill correspondence theory of truth. Zeyad's critics seem to be confused about the relationship between claims of social determination and their relationship to knowledge or ignorance on the one hand, and his theory of truth on the other hand. To say that access to true justified beliefs for the sake of simplification, we adopt the standard definition of knowledge. No, you are evil, don't ever do that. Justified true belief needs to die. Just bad. Sorry. Like I said, epistemology can make me angry. Just bad. To say that access to true justified beliefs about a certain domain of phenomenon, in this case about the social, political, cultural, economic, and intellectual history of the Middle East, is conditioned by one's social position, does not involve any denial that truth itself is to be defined as a relation of correspondence between propositions and the relevant facts. Yeah, the authors, they may have just set me up to be like, no, of course it doesn't matter. But like, yeah. This is a confusion which is worth pointing out because, as the philosopher of science Liam Bright notes, it is still around today in our contemporary second iteration of the culture wars. Yeah, this is still going on. They're saying you don't understand the truth. You're blinded by ideology. It's happening constantly. Right. Twitter's most famous Carnap defender cited. Yeah. All right, how much more of this do we got? Oh, we got almost 2 full pages. Okay, that's fine. All right, moreover, to say that one's access to certain truths is conditioned by one's social position does not commit oneself to thinking that access to certain truths is impossible or inevitable for people occupying a certain social position, but only that it may be easier or more difficult for them to do so. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy for you to think certain things about poor people when you're very wealthy, and vice versa. Like, why would you think certain things about very wealthy people when you're very poor? But like, that should be obvious, that people who are very far removed from you, you can form a belief about them based on whatever little information you have of them. Brennan points out that Zeyad had reservations about the fixation of post-colonial studies as a field on identity. One way to construe this reservation in epistemological terms, in which we have been speaking of Zeyad's intervention, is to think of his reservation as a rejection of the view that access to certain truths is impossible or inevitable for people occupying a certain social position. That is, he rejected strong versions of standpoint epistemology. Okay, and standpoint epistemology is that you can only know certain things if you come from a certain background, you have a certain standpoint. So he's rejecting this. He's being more universal, saying, no, you can always have access to different truths. It may just take more effort. It is also quite clear that sensitivity to the importance of social position for Zeyad did not lead him to think that the humanist enterprise should devolve into an endless methodological discussion of positionality that never gets at something substantive. Yeah, this is one of the problems. Like, if you think that like different perspectives are all valid, then where's the truth? Because everyone has their own truth, and then you have no like overarching big T truth. So he's saying Zeyad did not do this. Like, he was saying, no, you may have a better position to see some truths depending where you start off from, but that doesn't mean you can't find those out through some other method. I mean, this is a point I pressed upon me. I once was like, thinking like you need to have like a background. But it's like there are other ways to get to like the same truth. Like, multiple paths. You don't have to do it. Multiple realizability. You can realize a truth multiple ways. So there you go. For the philosophy of science crew. Emphasizing the clear convergence between Zeyad's project and Marxist philosophical positions also points to the tensions in Zeyad's approach. Brennan is adamant that Zeyad did not neglect the importance of economic elements as causal factors. Yet the debate between materialists and idealists in the domain of philosophy of history is not about the neglect of economic elements as causal factors per se. That is, it is not the case that idealists in the domain of philosophy of history hold the thesis that economic elements play no role in explaining human history. For example, Hegel, the paradigmatic idealist, never claims that economic elements are causally inert. Rather, the debate is about the relative causal importance of economic factors in comparison with ideational elements or representations. Here, despite Brennan's protestations, Zeyad seems to come across as a left Hegelian of sorts. Ivan says thinking of different identities cannot come to terms or get to know each other's positions seems opposed to Enlightenment values, truth, etc. Yeah, and I think that's what this author here, like this one, is saying about Zeyad, saying no, this person actually did like this sort of like modernist, like early modernist view where you can talk about stuff and, through rationality get there. And so the idea that they're representing in this book or whatever, Zeyad to have like other positions that, like there were different ways and like you couldn't get at stuff seems wrong. So yeah. I don't know of anyone really that takes standpoint like epistemology like super seriously. I'm sure there's like good research that comes out of the area because you can definitely, coming from certain backgrounds, know different things better. Like it's gonna happen. I mean, that's inevitable in my opinion. Like everyone's gonna know things slightly differently, slightly better or worse depending on your history and background. Like sure, but like that just means other people have to put a little bit more effort in to get to where you got to. But like what would be the in principle that you can't know what they know? I mean, you can't know something historical because you weren't there, but you can read about it. But it's like, okay, yeah, you can't know subjective experience, but again, what are we knowing at that point? People in schools love standpoint epistemology. Oh yeah, you made that point before. Yeah, see, I don't know enough of that, what they talk about. So it's like, the point, I remember we were discussing this Unreal, was that when you're trying to develop a kid to get them to learn, like get them to like understand stuff, you want to build on where they come from. And so it's like, in that case, in an educational setting, I think it makes a lot more sense. And so in that case, it's good because you're trying to build up the kid, have them have a good base of like confidence and knowledge and to rely upon for them to then analyze bigger and more complex problems. That's fine. But again, is that going to work once you're an adult? I don't think so. You have to be able to get along with other people, and the idea that you can't understand them, even if they're like stupid and wrong, it's like, I understand people being stupid and wrong. I've been stupid and wrong before. I try to be stupid and wrong less. Might happen again, but yeah. Lumen says, I think the strong version is the view is hard to defend, but the weak is almost definitely true. Yeah, that's like, it could be either practical in the educational sense or like the weak that you know something because you were someplace else and like you got to experience it, but that's not saying anything grand about knowledge of like if they were there, they could experience it and they could experience something similar. Hey, Frank, what's up? Well, I mean, that's practical problems, Frank. Practical. Aloha. Yeah. Yeah, for anyone new coming in, we're just reading like a commentary on a book where it looks like this author has some problems with the book for, not doing an author justice. Like the author was part of a history. The book seems to think they weren't part of like sort of this narrative history. So it's okay. They've made some arguments. I disagreed with some of them, but we got a page and a half left. Let's see. Okay, so Zeyad seems to come off as a left Hegelian. For example, Brennan writes that for Zeyad, the first step in social change, therefore, was critique, and this saying no to power was developed best and most thoroughly, he argued, in the humanities. Yeah, so first thing you have to do is someone says no, and that's what humanities are good for. Zeyad is siding with Hegel and the left Hegelians rather than with Marx. When all is said and done, Zeyad would readily assent to Hegel's declaration that once the realm of representation is revolutionized, actuality will not hold out. This also allows us to clarify the disagreements between Zeyad and some third world Marxists such as Samir Amin, Sadiq Jalal al-Azm, and Ijaz Ahmed. Sorry, however, I said these people's names. The disagreement was a disagreement about whether causal primacy ought to be accorded to economic factors or representations, as Amin bluntly put it in an interview when asked about his main disagreement with Zeyad. Quote, Edward Zeyad missed the most important aspect, political and economic. End quote. We can still be a Marxist and think that, for example, the Marxism of the Second International did not accord sufficient causal weight to representations, but it is difficult to see how one could still be a Marxist and think that representations have the same causal weight as economic factors when, for example, we were trying to give a causal explanation of imperialism in the Middle East. Exactly. It's a little lamenting we don't have all of our Marxists here today. Sometimes we have a bunch of them in chat. So yeah, it's what's more important, the money or the idea? You know, get new allies. Easier said than done, Ivan. Easier said than done. Sometimes you have to, you're stuck with who you have at the time. You don't always get to choose your friends. Friends of convenience. Okay. Of course, Zeyad never claimed to be a Marxist, and to this extent, criticizing him for not being a consistent Marxist would be pointless. But Brendan has an unfortunate tendency to represent Zeyad's Marxist critics as simply having misunderstood him, whereas it seems to me that they understood him quite well and simply disagreed with him on the question of the causal equipollence of representations and economic factors. Admittedly, the matter is rendered even more complicated by the fact that no one, as far as I know, has ever had epistemic access to economic causal factors independently of representations. Sometimes you have to even ally with positivists. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of... There's some, like, at my work, I don't really deal with the politics, but it happens. There are politics, and I avoid it. But, it's like you have to make friends. Oh, in my family, this is a funny one. So, it was quite often in my family. My family always wanted me to, like, have a great job and do, like, impressive, like, money-making things and, like, do stuff. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I hate these fucking desk jobs. They suck. And so I didn't want to do them. And my grandma, on my mom's side, she would be like, she had an attitude too. She would do whatever she wanted. So I realized at a certain point that if I took my grandma's side, she would back me up. She was politically savvy. And that's what happened. It would then be like my mom and my dad and my brother against me, and me and my grandma on my side. So 3-2 is like, that's fightable. Like, I could defend myself then. And a few years, like almost a decade now, my grandma died, and then it was me versus the three of them. And that was a lot harder, but I didn't always agree with my grandma, but I would defend her on stupid shit that she would do because she would get my back too. And so she understood. It was very funny when I was defending her on stupid shit that I disagreed with, and but it worked out. It was okay. Yes, exactly, O'Neill O'Brien. So yeah. Well, they wanted me. The idea was, they had misconceptions about economics. My parents both worked for big institutions, and it all kind of worked out for them. They didn't understand me being a millennial and being like, holy shit, this sucks. Like, there is no good, like, working for big corporations. You're not getting a good job with, like, a pension. I'm like, I'm a millennial. Like, I've experienced wars and economic booms and busts more times by the time I was, like, 25, like, the whole world had been, like, shit on. Yeah, 25, 26. Yeah, something like that. Like, everything was, like, fucked for me. I'm an elder millennial. And so, it's like... it just didn't work, and like they didn't understand my sort of rejection of this. So I was like, no. It's like, yeah, you know what I saw? I saw the first .com. I saw the what was it? The first Gulf War, the .com crash, 9/11, the housing bubble, and then we've got the political crap in this country in the teens, from teens and up, and now we've got wars again. It's like, yeah, welcome. Unreal says, I'm Gen X, but I saw through that from the beginning. Took me a little longer to see through academia. Yeah, so that was the thing. We come from different standpoints. I saw through academia very quickly, but also because where I was in the world. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit, so they were arguing with me. I was like, get a job. It's like, uh-huh. And my brother now, he's got a good job. He went back to school, did everything the more like standard way than I did. He took a job in Europe because he couldn't get a good job here that would promote him. So he took basically he got his boss's job, but he had to move to Europe. And he wasn't like, my mom was super sad about that. But it was like, yeah, well, congratulations. You wanted to do the corporate thing. Well, you have to go where the jobs are. Like, you have to. So, yeah. I've seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea-beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. Yes. I love that movie. Yeah. Alright, let's finish this up. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, how do you actually understand economics outside of your representations? Economics is not separate from how you represent value in the world. And so how you represent value in the world is going to be colored by how you understand the world in general, which is going to be affected by what we call representations. Okay. In fact, the work of someone like Samir Amin can be understood as a struggle against non-veridical representations in the domain of economic theories of development. Hence, there's a sense in which somebody like Amin would agree with Zeyad that the struggle in the realm of representations is important, although he disagreed with him on the importance of these specific domain representations that Zeyad focused on. Yeah, so he didn't like the one Zeyad was talking about, but that doesn't mean it wasn't important. Having political discussions in chat. Okay. It seems that Zeyad, as a professional literary critic who engaged in struggles in the realm of representation, wanted to give the realm of representation at least an equal causal weight to economic factors. After all, as Brennan notes throughout the book, Zeyad was never really satisfied with the idea that one should pursue theoretical literary criticism for its own sake, but it seemed that Zeyad's way to justify for himself his devotion to theoretical literary criticism was to posit that the realm of representation had at least equal causal weight with economic factors. Yeah, but see, that's also the problem here. As I was saying earlier, this is maybe you're biased. If you are an academic, you always have to believe that what you're doing matters because you're just writing papers. And so you have to, there's always a danger that as an academic who's writing papers, that you have to say, well, I'm actually doing something in the world. The papers mean something, but that's how you get paid, and that's what you like to do. So you want to feel good, but is that really the case? I don't know. One question that Brennan's study implicitly raises is whether it is possible to be a Marxist in literary criticism in the first place. There seems to be a fundamental tension, perhaps even rising to the level of logical contradiction, in thinking that representations are not the most important causal factor in, for example, bringing about the liberation of Palestine, while also thinking of oneself as being primarily oriented in one's life around this goal, all the while having to engage in struggles over representations by virtue of being a professional literary critic. This seems to be a recipe for agony, an agony that seems to be central to Brennan's biography, and it is not clear that Zeyad ever found a way out of it. Okay. Yeah, so not bad. As far as book reviews go, this one kind of liked it. Like just descriptions. Sometimes they're just like, oh, this is what got said, this is what got said, this is what got said. This one was a little bit more critical. Haven't always had them. What's up, Jordan hates Ayn Rand? Welcome in. I also am an Ayn Rand non-enjoyer. Yeah. Ivan is against ideologies that are not amenable to logic, reason, etc. I think some woke ideologies are like that. Well, they would disagree with your definition of logic and reason then, Ivan. Yeah, so, let's give this a review. This was, like I said, this was a, a book discussion. And so now everyone in chat, if you are in chat now, welcome in Jordan. You are included. You can use these emotes to rate the paper. Point this way, point the wrong way. So like if the paper was fun, had fun ideas, you give it a brain dance. If it made big claims that shriveled up, like, they claimed they were going to say something and then they didn't, then or they didn't make the argument, then Nog grapes. Navel gazing only for academics, you get the navel. Nagoro for the Ouroboros. For deep ancient ideas, they were talking about Zeyad. Now some of that stuff was deep that they got into, might have been deep, but representation and the world perhaps. Existential or artistic drama, we get the Scream, and yeah. And the Turd, all style, no substance, and Nog Knife did its slice and dice arguments for, good old things. Unreal Brian's your alley. There you go. Yeah. And you can also use the global Twitch TV emotes, vote yay and vote nay. So we've got two Nog navel gazing. So yeah, it's kind of, this was very academic oriented. Brian says, so far I haven't read anything by Zeyad, and this led me to be no way to be excited to do so. Yeah, this did not, this was I think the author was kind of hard on the book writer, Timothy Brennan. So they were kind of hard on that. They didn't really say anything great, but like, sometimes when you read these books, like they say, this is an important book that has many great contributions. The criticisms below should not be to take away any of the grand important things that were said in this book. That did not happen in this review. This person just went right in and was like, I don't think this is exactly right. And so, does anyone have views in the philosophy of logic? I have views in the philosophy of logic. I am published in the philosophy of logic. If you care, let's see. So this is my latest publication. If you care, it's called The Paradox, Non-Paradox, and Conjunction Fallacy, Non-Fallacy. And you can read it if you want. So yeah, I do have views in this area. So, talking about logical paradoxes. So we've got a give please, which will not be recorded, but I record only mine. So we got a vote nay, thank you, and a grapes from Tindarios. Appreciate it. If anyone is watching on Kick, I will record your stuff and add it in later. I do not record reviews from Kick yet, but I am dual streaming, or multicasting as they call it. So I'll wait another minute. What am I gonna say? I don't hate this paper. I don't dislike it. This was kind of very, review-ish to me. This is confusing me. Huh. Okay. Oh, okay. I misread something. All right. There we go. All right. So let's see. I'm going to say... Yeah, well, let's give it a nog navel. I think that's all I have to say about it. It doesn't need anything else. It doesn't need a vote nay. It doesn't need a vote nay, against it. Or you could also give it both. But like, if you are interested in this stuff, it would be worth a read. But again, that's why it's navel-gazing paper. You have to be interested in Zeyad and this book.